Hey everyone, welcome in. My name's Jen Mancusi. I am the CEO and co-founder of Growgetter. I'm really excited to be moderating today's conversation. We've got a really exciting session lined up with two industry leaders, Rónán Dowling-Cullen from Bounce Insights and Jonathan Tice from Fit to Scale. We're going to unpack how retrieval technology is transforming how organizations access and use their research intelligence. So we'll set the stage a little bit while everybody's filtering in. Over the years, anybody who's been in the industry for a long time knows that there's a common pain point across organizations, and that's that insight teams have been trying to make research accessible across organizations. I wrote an article about democratizing research in 2010. So this is a long-standing problem that we're still working to try to figure out and solve. Despite like massive investment in DMPs and knowledge management software, so much of research is still scattered across systems. It's hidden in data silos, and it's often inaccessible when business questions are arising. A few years back, Gartner reported that duplicated or redundant research data can cost organizations an average of $12.9 million annually. So when insights are hard to find, organizations are falling back on commissioning the same studies over and over, wasting time and money. So much research is duplicated. But the exciting thing that we're going to talk about today is that thanks to rapid advances in AI and technology, what seemed difficult, challenging, or impractical is now becoming a reality. So today's discussion is going to be all about how retrieval technology is making that possible. So enough about me, enough from me. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ro and Jonathan. Jonathan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, of course. Thanks, Jen. So Jonathan Tice, I'm the founder of Fit to Scale. I'm helping a lot of research technology companies to scale up their business. And prior to that, I've actually been in the research space for an embarrassingly long time, about 2 decades. And from an earlier predecessor of Dynata, I was helped to scale up Forsta, and more recently was at Fuel Cycle. And I've really seen this issue firsthand and have tried to tackle it at different iterations of the kind of technology development cycle and seen exactly how information either is disseminated or not in bigger organizations and among brands.
Awesome. Ro.
Cool. Yeah, I'll jump in now. Hi guys, my name is Rónán. I'm the co-founder, co-CEO here at Bounce Insights. For anybody who doesn't know already, Bounce is an AI operating system for market research. We focus on insight retrieval and in quantitative research for large consumer-facing brands, generally speaking. My personal background is computer science originally, and I kind of transitioned and moved into market research and then founded the business alongside Charlie and Josh and Brandon, our other two co-founders. And now I focus on product within Bounce. So I've been the one leading the retrieval engine. I wouldn't say building. I think our engineering team might kill me if I said that. Killing themselves building it, but leading up the product side of that build.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to chat with you both today about this topic. We've heard the buzzwords. I even might have mentioned some in the opening here, but democratization and self-serve and agile. But what is actually standing in the way of delivering on those promises?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jen. I think up until maybe kind of the advent of large language models, so we all saw the boom of ChatGPT and things like that, it was really, really difficult for pieces of technology to actually understand, and I'm putting understand in air quotes here, any piece of past secondary knowledge. So that could be structured data like Excels and CSVs, or it could be unstructured data like past market research reports. And it was possible for small use cases, but not really possible to be able to understand a piece of information and then disseminate that to somebody else. And that makes democratization really difficult because it's not possible for a piece of technology to understand it. You actually need people to understand it. And it means you need a person to be actually actively doing the democratization as opposed to, a piece of technology that can do it much more quickly. That's one of the major problems that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to add to that, so what I've seen is that previous iterations of or solutions for this really were focused on, okay, you've held the meeting and you've delivered the PowerPoint, and then people forget about it right after the meeting. And then they wanted a better way to store and have basically that information on file. But if you've tried to search through a corporate SharePoint or similar ever before, you know how frustrating that is and how even a mislabeled, mistagged, or misnamed file can screw you up. And now we're really going, with the power of kind of LLMs, we're really moving past just, access to get into actually being able to, get answers to real questions, which is a pretty profound change in general.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose the last thing that we've seen on our side has been trust. It's really, really difficult if you are responsible for research in an organization to trust that a marketeer, say for example, will glean the right insight from a piece of data that they have or a report or the combination of those things. Because as we all know, like there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can use a stat to back up almost anything. And what you want is that your marketeers or your other stakeholders are getting the right answer from the piece of research that you provided them or the data set you provided them. So having that ability to ensure that actually this isn't a biased piece of data or this is a relevant piece of data to answer their question is really, really important there as well.
Mhm. So it's really like, it's not just a technology problem that we've had up until now. There's also people problems and process problems. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think they're all interlinked, right? Like the people problems cause the technology problems, which cause the people problems. Like one of the huge ones that we've seen that thankfully we've been able to broach and solve with our customers is around like tagging of information, right? So you could have this knowledge repository that's incredibly useful if everything is tagged correctly, and that takes manual effort. So then humans don't want to do the tagging. I mean, like I don't want to do the tagging. You don't want to do the tagging to go, oh, this is about this product in this market with this type of consumer. And it means then the tool becomes less useful because it's not able to find those things. And then people don't want to use it because it's not useful. And you end up with this, oh, it's not worth my time to tag it because it's not useful anyway. And then it's not useful because you won't tag it. And these kind of negative cycles can happen really, really easily.
Yeah. So there are like, what you guys are talking about so far, like there's some very specific sort of detail, like tagging of insights, whatever, and then these broader organizational challenges that are making it difficult for democratization of insights. Like, what are some of those like blockers, I guess, internally from, from those big organizations that maybe are preventing this from being possible at all from, even trying at a technology level.
I think because there are these massive repositories that people have created and no one's curated them, I think it is something that and it's not very useful in general. I think that in and of itself is just like what has happened before, and the failure of what's happened before is a major blocker. So there's an assumption, I think, that um, you know, moving data around and getting it into a useful format and getting access to that data is going to be, is something that could be potentially like, difficult in general, because it has been difficult in past. Luckily things have moved on since then, but that's, in general, I think that's something that's space that people, an emotional state maybe that people come from, initially when they're thinking about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that with our customers as well, that they've tried and failed in the past. And there's definitely sentiment within their organization of like, oh, we tried that data lake thing back, 10 years ago, and it didn't really work because we couldn't get any answers from it. And we spent a lot of money and put a lot of process around it, and it was painful for everybody. And then stopping. And I think the the change that's happened and the reason why this is now possible is really that understanding piece that I've been talking about, and then the ability to leverage data on top of understanding documents to give market research specific answers. So both that ability to understand the data that you have and not require tagging and things like that, but also the ability to trust the quality of the answers that will be given. Those two things together can really get organizations over that hump as well.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what role does security and data privacy play in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously massively important, right? And for us, and I think for all organizations, it's a hygiene factor. It's not at all insurmountable. It's kind of a big, scary topic. But as long as you have high quality, moral people who are running these businesses and structuring these contracts, then data privacy can be protected from all sides. And it's not a major issue, but it's something that's really important to bridge over as a hygiene factor, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's been um, a big component that maybe slows businesses down in kind of investing in this sort of thing. Maybe, we've seen a lot of organizations build their own internal systems for this kind of thing, and just for that reason, right, to not have any kind of external technology or move their data outside of their systems, and that can be a really worthwhile investment if it's used the way that we want it to. And I think we're going to get maybe more into that debate later on in the conversation. But that data security and privacy piece does tend to be a big component in that.
Of course, yeah, it's paramount. Like if you don't have data security or data privacy, it's a no-go on any project, like for us in our business or for anybody in their life or in any business. So it's incredibly important, but it does seem to be solved, let's say, a solved problem, right? Where people can get around it.
For sure. So, Ro, from your work with global brands, is there like one moment that really kind of made it clear how broken the system was that you wanted to come up with a solution for it?
Yeah, I guess it wasn't one moment, but it was hearing the same thing over and over again from, 40, 50 of our existing clients, and then maybe 40, 50 of potential clients as well, particularly around retrieval, which was like, you might be surprised, but for large global brand X, right, who sells drinks, let's say, we have a really small team and we struggle to, be able to service all of our stakeholders. And when I'm looking for information on a particular topic, I just know that Jonathan knows about APAC and yeah, for our products. So I go and message Jonathan, or Jen knows about North America. So I go and talk to Jen about that problem. And I'd love to be able to have that information be available to me without relying on Jen's memory or my memory to figure out those things. And hearing that paragraph 40 times from all of our existing customers and then 40 times from all of the potential customers, that was the key moment where we started to go, okay, everybody has this problem. It's ubiquitous among the industry and among all organizations, really, and we can solve that problem for those people.
And think about how, just in the example you gave, across time zones, across teams, across all the meetings that everyone's in, how many kind of delays and how long it would take you to potentially chase that all down.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And all of the market researchers that we work with and all the ones that I know want to be working on business strategy and making the right decisions and taking the right actions for their business. They don't want to be working in the process. They don't want to be figuring out, who do I need to email to find this report or get access to this report? Even I know it exists, but I can't even see it. So they're incredibly keen to be able to have that at their fingertips so they can do their real strategic pieces of work.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I mean, just people leave companies, right? Or move to different roles within a company, and all of a sudden you can't find them anymore if you're relying on that sort of, oh, this, Jonathan knows everything about this topic, and you've got to track them down to get it. I mean, that comes and goes. And it's,
Yeah.
not sustainable. And especially the larger the organization, what are the chances you know who that person is even to go to?
Exactly. Yeah, that coin goes both ways as well, right? As an organization, you have big risk if you have all of your knowledge sitting with one individual. But as an individual, it means that your work-life balance probably isn't as good, because if something is needed urgently and you're on your holidays in the Bahamas, right? Jen's going to be calling you going, Jonathan, I need that document that you have on your laptop. Can you go and get out of the pool and go get it, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's incredibly important from a risk perspective, both personally to your work-life balance and to the company as well.
For sure, for sure. Um, okay, amazing. I want to, start pivoting into like kind of how things are changing and what's new and in sort of advancements. I just want to address everybody who's joined since we started. Please, we're having an open dialogue here on this topic. So if you have questions, please pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to them throughout. If not right when we're chatting, then certainly at the end. So please, yeah, fill in your questions as they come up. So, let's start with kind of like what has fundamentally changed in the last maybe 12 to 18 months from a technology perspective that is making, that's solving some of the problems we've been talking about.
Yeah, so I think in the last 2 or 3 years, we kind of had the large language models come out, but I guess in the last 12 to 18 months was the ubiquity of large language models being available. And that's done two things in my view. One, it's enabled us to, like I was saying, actually understand a document. And what that means in technical language is actually take that document and put it into a vector space where you can go, okay, well, this document is near to this question, and therefore they're similar, and therefore it's probably relevant. So it means you don't need a human to do that work. And then the second thing is that humans are now expecting to be able to get answers to their questions when they ask, not just receive files, right? I don't know about you guys, but I had my first moment maybe 9 or 10 months ago when I Googled for something and I had to click into one of the links and it was the wrong link and I went to the next link. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? Right? Like ChatGPT can just answer this question for me. I don't have to go through the pain of actually searching through all of this stuff. So I think on both sides, there's been a technological shift to enable this, but also a like consumer expectation or a client expectation that they shouldn't have to dive through all of these documents because one, humans aren't great at it. I know I'm not personally great at it, but two, it's just really painful to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting that like not like as technology becomes, it solves your problem a little bit better, then you kind of are looking for it to do that all the time. So the experiences that we're having on in our personal lives, I can remember a few years ago where it was like, if an Uber was going to take more than like 3 minutes, we're like stomping our feet. Like, how does an Uber take that long? And then that filtered into this like expectation of speed and business and in other areas of our lives, right? And so this feels very similar. It's like, when I'm searching for I'm not searching keywords anymore, individual words. I'm asking questions to Google or to ChatGPT or Perplexity, and I'm looking for an answer. I'm not looking for a resource, which is very, very different in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, completely. And for me personally, there was that window where Google didn't have its AI overviews fully launched yet. And I was like really feeling the pain in there. Or the Uber example is really good as well.
Yeah. When now I want to also kind of touch on this word retrieval that we've been sort of using, and this is the topic of the conversation today, this concept of retrieval. Like, how is that different from search? Is that what we're talking about here? This idea of asking questions, or, how is it different from traditional knowledge management or DMP platforms, and why is it important to kind of distinguish?
Yeah,
Sure.
it's a really good
Oh, go
question.
ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
no, you go.
Yeah, so I think the really important thing is the earlier versions of this really relied on people to tag files and then the naming conventions, and then even some of the kind of underlying metadata. So where did this data come from and what are the properties of those files, which is really pretty flat. It doesn't give you a whole lot. With retrieval, it's really giving you meaning. So it's actually interpreting files, and then it's also and so it's giving you that answer. So you're able to actually ask a normal question. And why that is so important is it's no longer the most technical, the researcher's researcher that can answer those questions. And so it unlocks the ability for an entire organization to better understand their all of their insights kind of across the board in ways that just weren't possible. Like combining files didn't happen before in any meaningful way. And so summarizing that together and really giving answers, not files, is really how I would summarize it.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jonathan. I guess the example that I've used with clients and internally with our teams to explain that is a retrieval engine rather than a search engine. You can treat more like a human. So you can go solve my problem for me, not what files might be relevant to give me the answer to this problem, right? So instead of just handing you a file that may contain the answer to your problem, it actually goes and each of the individual sources that could answer your question and comes back. What a like really, really good colleague would do if you ask them a question, as opposed to like a snarky colleague who might just send you the document and be like, it's in there, Jonathan, go find it.
Check the intranet. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah, exactly. Yeah, let me Google that for you.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So, it goes back to that sort of like that people problem of, if you haven't named it properly or haven't put in the metadata, I mean, that comparison to search is actually really relevant here too. The search results that you're getting are the ones that are best optimized for search, not the ones that are best optimized to answer your question. So they have the right keywords and the right metadata in those links that you're clicking on going, this isn't what I need, this isn't what I need. Whereas, and same with the research, right? If it's named properly, we just had this experience earlier today. I was looking for a file and it was named something awful and couldn't find it. So it's only as good as how you've optimized it. So the generative AI technology today actually kind of surpasses that a little bit and is actually looking at the content for something that's useful as opposed to looking for something that's optimized, which is massively different from the way it was very, like, really not that long ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the second thing as well that's really important there is that point I touched on before around trust. So having retrieval engines that are domain specific so you can actually trust the answers that are given. Because I'm sure if you ask a rocket scientist, right, like, do you think a retrieval engine would be good at giving an answer based on all of the data that you have? It would go, no, it needs to be trained in rocket science to be able to understand that. So the combination of understanding, but then domain expertise to be able to build trustworthy answers to questions too. Those two things together have really unlocked what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Jonathan, what are you seeing kind of out in the market with different organizations? You work with a lot of different organizations. Like, are you seeing a shift in, companies prioritizing this? Is there, any kind of new um, appetite for this type of technology, or are we still kind of in the same spot of, hey, we're just looking for ways to democratize our data?
I think that there is a pretty big change just because of how many companies are doing, have AI specific initiatives, and then specific also with regards to just this change in behavior that you're seeing on a consumer and a business level. The most organizations now are thinking in terms of this as they know that this is something that will enable them to provide that trust, kind of that insights team answer that they weren't able to do before. And I think a lot of organizations are figuring out, is this a buy versus build? And the build side of it has historically failed. If you look at, the curation, the maintenance of internal tools, that's very likely to kind of continue. And if you talk to those in, you know, research insights, or on the UX side, really all the kind of different facets of the kind of insights space, their access to technology and to ongoing, internal apps has historically been a problem. So I think that a lot of folks know that they need a better answer here, and they can be more strategic. But I still think that there's a little bit of a debate, that's still happening internally. And I think if the scar tissue from kind of the, BI initiatives and data lakes and trying to combine data across silos without this tech, I think is probably leading more folks to kind of explore solutions than they were prior.
Yeah, interesting. Um, I I'm curious about, we've name dropped some of the big ones, ChatGPT or Perplexity, or, there's a lot of kind of generic open source AI tools out there. What do you think, like, why is it important for companies to kind of use a retrieval system that is built to suit insights versus leveraging a system like that. Or, you talk about the build versus buy. We're going to talk about that even more detail in a minute. But like, you know, why not just use a generic kind of open source platform like OpenAI or Perplexity on your research?
So, overall, I think it's really how, the understanding of the kind of underlying files, and kind of having your own, really your own kind of insights copilot to kind of help navigate that is really the difference. So, the understanding of discrete different types of, files, be them structured or unstructured, and being able to make that connection, make meaning across different types of files with different structures, is really I think is really the difference. And that's how you get beyond kind of that simple kind of keyword search that was, in the past really relied upon.
Yeah, I think that there's two parts to the problem. So like we use ChatGPT internally. I use Gemini and ChatGPT in my personal life and in work life. They're fantastic and really useful tools. Um, there's two parts to the retrieval problem. There's the search part, so find the right files, and then there's the actual analysis part, and that's how we break it down when we do this internally. From a search perspective, these tools aren't very good. They're like, particularly when you get to large data sizes, right? If you've got terabytes of data, you can't just chuck that into ChatGPT and see what happens. One, I wouldn't recommend you do it from a data security and privacy perspective. Two, it's also not going to be able to deal with that. So search is kind of a different topic. The analysis piece, once you know, okay, I know that these three PDF reports and this Excel spreadsheet and this CSV and this SPS file, these contain my answer. Doing the analysis with them, there's two problems with using a generic tool like a ChatGPT or a Gemini. One is nuance, right? So large language models in general are what I would describe as lossy compression algorithms, right? So a compression algorithm is something that makes large data small, right? So you can think about JPEGing a file to make JPEGing an image to make it smaller. But the lossy part is you lose some of the fidelity of the data. So if you JPEG an image, you get a smaller image file, but you get a lower quality image where maybe you can't see the background or you can't see that like little detail over there. You might not be able to read a piece of text that's in it. You can still see, oh, there's a person in the image, but not the same quality. And nuance is incredibly important in our space in market research because usually you're not looking for like, what do consumers in general think about fizzy drinks, right? Or sodas. You're much more looking at, oh, well, like what is the interesting differentiation that I can pull out of this that's actually a really nuanced point and not the generic piece, the bit that would be lost in a JPEG image, right? So that's makes it really difficult for generic models to be able to answer those questions. And then the second piece, and we've talked about this before, is around actually trusting the answer to have this additional other meta context, right? So the rocket scientist example, right? You want your rocket science retrieval engine to be trained deeply in rocket science so that they are actually able to give high quality answers with the like generic context that any rocket scientist would have along with the data specific for their problem. So with those two, you kind of lose nuance and you can't really trust that it has the additional other context, the like metadata about your industry that would be relevant. So that makes it really difficult for these large language models to be able to perform at the tasks that they're asked. And often they will give an answer, but just not with lots of confidence.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, that sort of like, specialization. I mean, just like a person. I wouldn't want to talk to a non-rocket scientist about rocket science. Not that that's a topic of conversation that I have all that often, but if I were to have that conversation, I'd want to have it. If I had, questions, I would want to know from an expert. And so the technology is the same, right? It is trained on certain, you know, expertise, I guess. So understanding insights and research is important in the retrieval process, different than I think that distinction you made of why it's different than search, because that sort of generic search for something, find the keyword, deliver the result doesn't necessarily require that level of expertise. But the retrieval piece, that's that distinction again that you were talking about, is, does require some expertise, not just on the human side, but the tech as well.
Exactly, yeah. Like search puts all of the onus and the responsibility for the output onto the end user, right? So it'll go, I think this is kind of what you want, but I'm just going to throw it at you and see what happens. Whereas retrieval, when you're actually answering questions, the responsibility becomes shared, right? And actually the retrieval engine takes some responsibility for this being in the right context and the right piece of information as well.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about searching for an email in my inbox that is never, I never get
Doesn't
what I'm
work.
looking for. Even putting in the person's name where I know that we said this in the email, I never get what I'm looking for. And that is the frustration that, you know, my solution for that is I don't do it. I scroll because I am probably better at finding what I'm looking for than the tech is. And so thinking back to that beginning part of this conversation of why has it been such a challenge up until now? Because when you search and you don't find what you're looking for, you just stop trying. The solution there, like Gartner said, $12.9 million is spent in research that is done a second time because we've looked for it, we can't find it, and we don't have the time to invest. So, yeah, that what a difference that makes if you search for something and it actually gives you the answer. Then all of a sudden I'm saving all that time and energy and resource and actually getting what I need.
Exactly, yeah.
Amazing. Um, so let's talk about the practicalities of like implementing something like this at a big organization. What does it actually look like to put a retrieval solution in place at a large and potentially complex organization?
Yeah, so I suppose from our experience working with our customers, there's kind of three ways or three steps to it, right? The ideal end state for all customers and their perspective is to have one source of truth that knows everything the organization knows and is able to answer effectively any question that they could have about their consumers or their customers, right? Now that is a long-term, you integrate with their systems, their data continues to live where it should live, privacy and security is all handled, and then you have all people in the organization have access to it. That's a long and heavy process that takes often years to get spun up. But the other options are pick specific niches, right? So it might be a product line or it might be a specific team. And you'd be amazed how quickly you can get spun up with something really, really useful with just a subset of the data available in an organization that might be specific to a particular market for their team, for their marketing team, for example, focus solely on, New York as a state, right? And that can give them really, really high quality answers to business questions for that use case, and then you can step to it from there. So, in terms of implementation, what we normally recommend is pick a smaller problem that you can get immediate value from, and then step to the larger integration. And then once you've proven value to the higher ups that be who might want to block this, then it's much, much easier to go, well, we're getting so much value out of this in North America. Why don't we roll this out worldwide?
That's a great approach, especially, I mean, I've heard for years and years, when big organizations are trying out a new piece of technology or a new vendor or a new partner or something, it's the concept of piloting or experimenting. And so the ability to start small, because when we're having this conversation about retrieval and, DMP and knowledge management, it feels like you have to go big, you have to do it all. And so what you've described, this, kind of picking these subsets of the organization to pilot, I mean, if I'm a brand looking to implement this, it's music to my ears that I can do it on a smaller scale and prove the value first. It's so important.
Yeah, totally. And you can do things like just take all of your past quant research, right? And take the raw data and chuck it into it so that you now know, okay, we definitely haven't run a quant project on this in the past. You might have to go and ask somebody about quality. You might have to go and ask somebody about, social listening or reports that you've bought, but at least it'll give you cover in that area. And it's funny what we find is that the like Pareto principle really applies to organizations and data where like there ends up being 10 or 20 data sources that are used over and over and over again and then a really long tail of value, and we can capture that long tail of value incrementally over time, but if you can get that first chunk you actually get 80 or 90% of the value up front.
Yeah, and one thing too, when you see this actually in action, it's pretty amazing. Like going from what it was before to kind of, really spending a lot of energy trying to search through things, usually after the business question has been asked, and actually being able to answer that question in the meeting with what data is available is just the emotional difference there, and also just the insights leader, how they feel relative to their relationship with their stakeholders just changes pretty drastically. Just being able to get into that. Here's everything we know about this one subject for this group of stakeholders in that meeting, and then knowing where there's what, if any, holes exist. That's what really gets me excited about this, and really gets the really insights leaders excited about this, because they're just they have so much power at their fingertips that way.
Yeah. That's such an important point too, because I've heard that conversation over the years too of, even not just looking at past research, an insight leader in a room presenting findings on a particular study that they've just done, and an unexpected question comes up in the room. Well, what do we know about this? What about this other thing? Did we ask about that? And to be able to say, let me get that for you, as opposed to I'm gonna have to leave this room, reschedule a meeting for a week from now to then get you the answer to that question. Like, what a difference to have it at your fingertips. And maybe it wasn't part of the story that you were presenting, or the big insights, or to be able to say, hey, that wasn't an interesting finding. Yeah, we did learn this, but this is the thing, to be able to say that and support it with the data and the research right in the moment is so powerful.
Yeah, 100%.
Totally. Or even to be able to say, we actually don't know that. To know what you don't know is really, really valuable, and actually it gives real confidence. Like when I'm working with somebody and they go, I know this and I definitely don't know that, not we might know that. That gives shake to the whole room usually when people say that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point too. We didn't ask that. Let's find out is a very different answer than, oh, I'm not sure. Let me get back to you. So
Exactly. Exactly.
now, we've touched a little bit, both of you, on the sort of build versus buy debate, and maybe you've already answered the question, but what, just to kind of pull that back all together, why do you think trying to build internally, especially with those general purpose LLMs, is usually failing?
So from my vantage on that, there's a very big difference between um, assembling. So the same curation problem kind of is what I would pin this to. So the are you with regards to building yourself versus buying, are you going to build this throughout your workflow, and are you going to maintain it from that point forward? The other thing that I think is really important is that kind of that trust layer too. So there's an ability for the kind of insights team to kind of have different discrete ways that they're presenting this information internally. And the likelihood of most insights teams to having a lot of those technical resources to do this and actually design their own kind of semantic search, their own ability to kind of talk to all those different systems and then keep that running, is just low. And that's really what you would need to do. It's not hey, we have access to the latest model from OpenAI, or we have Cloud or whatever. That just really doesn't do much for you at all. It doesn't actually get that same kind of pixelated view that came to mind when Ro was talking before, from the high quality image. Is That's just not going to do what you need it to do. And again, you'll lose that trust of that the insights team has, because there's that much less expertise, there's that much less kind of fidelity that's coming across, and that nuance to the data. So I think that isn't going to dissuade some from trying to go on that journey themselves, but it's not a lot of light task to take up.
Or,
Yeah, I think build versus buy is always a trade-off in businesses, right? Like we have this trade-off internally ourselves, even within our engineering team, right? Like, should we build this? Should we buy it? And building on top of existing, simple, generic tools make sense when what you're trying to build is really close to what they offer, right? Like, so if you wanted ChatGPT, but you wanted the background to be blue instead of gray, right? Like that's a really, really simple example, but you should probably just, build a HTML page that has that and it hot swaps out the coloring. But if you're talking about enterprise grade software that needs to be quite close to no fail, particularly around market research, where like, billion-dollar decisions are going to be made based on this information. To Jonathan's point about maintaining it, even beyond being able to build it, it's just a huge undertaking for businesses to take. And, sometimes if they have in-house tech teams that are built for doing that sort of thing for them, it can make sense. But most of the companies that we speak with don't, generally speaking, or aren't willing to put those resources towards something like a retrieval engine for market research like that. So it's really just like you're optimizing a cost function to find what's best for you. If you have generic tools that can solve your problem for you close to, and you can just add a little tweak that doesn't take maintenance, it makes sense to build it yourself. But if you want an enterprise level product that doesn't really exist, with generic tools that you can just bolt on like ChatGPT, then it's really worth your while going elsewhere. And I think that retrieval fits into that second category for so many companies because of what Jonathan was saying there around the fidelity not being good enough quality, like that pixelated image, and the trust piece. Those two things together really kind of take it out of the reach of something that you can quickly spin up and build and then with low cost maintain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that last thing you just said is a big component too, the speed factor, right? That having something that is fit for purpose and is able to be spun up pretty quickly is very different than building something long term, fully custom. I mean, if you're training your own LLM, that's a whole nother story, right? It's not generic, but it's not going to be quick either. And it requires a level of expertise internally that not all organizations have. If you do, great. But
Yeah,
Totally.
that latency question is a really important one. That can be the difference between, if you're talking about a lot of data, that's the difference between answering the question later and answering the question in the meeting.
for sure.
Exactly. And kind of the heuristic that we use internally is we build things that are part of our differentiator and we don't build things that are hygiene factors for us. So tools that we use that our customers don't care if we're using X tool or Y tool or built it ourselves, we generally buy because it's cheaper. We don't have to put energy into maintaining it, things like that. And then we can put all of our energy into differentiation. So that's usually a good heuristic that I like.
I love that. That's a great tip. Um, Now, you've talked a little bit about stakeholder empowerment and data control and how can insight leaders kind of support this sort of effort and not necessarily be bottlenecks to the data, because we have seen this the sort of opposite of the democratization, right? And wanting to kind of keep things close for some of the reasons you've mentioned, of not being able to interpret the data well or things like that. So, how do you encourage insights teams to be to empower this sort of future?
Sure. So, overall, I think that how the system's set up. So, like, kind of when you're, talking to different data sets and when you're putting it into the retrieval engine, I think is an important factor. What most insights teams really do want to have those kind of simple questions or simpler questions or follow-up questions answered effectively without them having to be in the middle of it, because they know that they're a bottleneck. There's a decision tree that's been going on for forever in larger organizations of do we make the business decision without any information, or do we make it with information, and do we need to collect more information? So there's a real struggle for insights teams to be able to answer at that kind of speed. In terms of that pushing data out, I think once folks really understand the mechanisms of retrieval engine and they're able to see like kind of the output that the bounce is able to do, with specific footnotes and with specific references, that's a really big difference between having a bunch of different kind of discrete data pieces and then for folks to be able to kind of create their own story with that. So I think that there's a real opportunity with regards to the storytelling element and to also deciding which is the data the pools of data that you want for this or that stakeholder. So to Ro's point before, the kind of getting this is the type of data that we want the wider organization to have and to be able to pull from. I think that to me is one of the more important things.
Yeah, definitely. And democratization really comes from, I guess, three different parts in my view. There's speed, cost, and access, right? So if something takes a long amount of time, it's not going to be very democratic. There's not going to be a lot of people who have the time to be able to access it. If it's expensive, then limits are going to go in place. And then if you just cut off access, then limits are in place as well. We can attack all three of those if organizations want, and we do in some where, the training wheels are off. Anybody in the organization can access and ask questions via the retrieval, or we can just focus on the speed and cost. By which I mean we can enable research and insights teams to be able to answer questions much, much more quickly by getting them the 99% or 95% of the way there, by getting them the right information, pulling it together for them in a thematic analysis. They can actually answer the question with sourcing, and then they can add their layer on top of that strategic input that I was talking about before. And that actually democratizes insights as well, because it means more people are able to ask them more questions more quickly, and they can actually get answers to their business questions, even if it has to go through a central research and insights team first. So you can get a good chunk of the way there without even giving all access to all people.
Yeah. I think that creates such um, a critical cultural difference in organizations as well, because not only are you answering a question in the moment, but you're creating an environment where curiosity is encouraged. And these conversations about companies being people first and being customer centric, just giving a space for people to ask those questions creates that curiosity in a way where you're not just trying to develop a new product or create a new ad campaign, but you're actually trying to create a new product or an ad campaign that's going to resonate with your customers or solve a problem that they have. And it, like the answers to the questions aside, creates a culture of wanting to be more customer centric and wanting to understand them. And even just those like little tidbits of information that maybe a marketer or an innovation leader didn't have before because they didn't hear the data point presented in a meeting or something. Now that's in there, it's institutional knowledge about the communities that they serve that just creates that customer centricity and that people first culture that so many organizations have been trying to foster. And having access to these answers just gives that opportunity, which is it's massively different than just answering a question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. You contrast that to, asked an overworked market research professional to go and spend 3 days answering your question for you and coming back maybe a little bit pissed off because you probably should have known the answer to that question anyway, versus just ask a retrieval engine the question, right? The volume of questions compounds exponentially from there, and that curiosity is able to flourish from there. And it means that the researchers are then getting asked the really interesting questions that maybe we don't have the answer to, whereas much more nuanced, and they get to like flex their expertise in those situations, not just I'll go and find that report and I'll pull out that metric and give it back to Jen because I know that she needs it, even though this is really frustrating for me.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk too about, the like we talked a little bit about rolling this out kind of small and then kind of expanding as you go, but what are some of the hurdles that you see in rolling this out? And maybe they're not just technical, but organizational. Like what role does change management play in this? And kind of what should companies be thinking about if they're wanting to embark on this journey of implementing retrieval in their businesses?
Yeah, I think that there's a few parts to this. One piece is the like having the end state in mind from the start, but not necessarily wanting to jump to that end state, right? So when you're talking about change management for us or for me internally, when somebody in my business wants to change something, I'm all about the value that it's bringing to our business, because one of our key kind of phrases that we say internally in Bounce is that there's an almost infinite number of net positive things we can do. We're trying to find the net positivist, right? Like the most important, most valuable things we can be doing. So a key thing if you're going to be a champion of something like this is being able to show value early, right? So that means get a small number of people using it for a particular use case and show business ROI. So if you can do that with, like we were saying, one small team or one particular market or one particular product, that kind of opens the door and builds a business case internally to be able to then roll it out further. Um, and then the other piece that I would say that's really, really important is just usage, right? So if you're going to give something like this a go, we've seen it go really well where people dive in with both feet and use it heavily. We've seen it kind of falter and fall off if, somebody starts, a contract with us and using the platform, but they use it maybe once for one question and then kind of fall off, right? So giving it that push to be able to start building that habit of asking these questions, like with, getting into the habit of asking ChatGPT rather than Google, right? The same thing, realizing that you get much, much more value out of it, even though you might default on your phone to clicking on the Google app instead of the ChatGPT app.
Yeah. Yeah, that usage piece is, you put all this in place and nobody uses it, then that's a problem. None of what we've talked about, all the benefits are sort of gone. So that
Exactly. And
change management
you don't
important.
want to mandate usage either, right? Mandating usage usually leads to friction and pain. What you want is to give it like enough initial momentum so that it then spirals from itself and grows exponentially. And what we found is that when people start by using it heavily in, let's say, the first week, their usage grows exponentially from there, right? We end up with like multiple questions an hour coming in, whereas the teams that might use it once or twice in the first week, it goes the other way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, let's wrap up with some final thoughts. I have a couple of last questions. One for you, Jonathan. If you could wave a magic wand and just change immediately how organizations are accessing and using their insights, what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's just been universally true of data and insights is how duplicative research is across and within an organization. About a third of all research is duplicated within the walls of a larger, like a Fortune 1000 company. And so what I think there's a real opportunity for researchers and insights leaders to do is to only add to their knowledge base. So know everything that they know, be able to share that within the organization and have everyone, much more deeply understand their customers and their markets, and then only add to that knowledge base. That is absolutely within reach, and something that can happen, but it's up to the open-mindedness of insights leaders to kind of enable that, and to put that in place within their own workflows.
Amazing. I love that. Only add to what you know. That's a great dream for us. Now, Ro, for you, from a bounce perspective, what's the most exciting opportunity that Retrieval is unlocking from traditional research workflows and knowledge management platforms that just alone they couldn't achieve?
Yeah, I think it's running much more interesting, innovative pieces of research. So once you have asked the question to everything you know, and it's kind of similar to Jonathan's point, but being able to run, okay, wow, that's it. There's a really interesting nuance here that we're missing. Let's go and explore that nuance as opposed to just running like generic brand sentiment or generic MPD type pieces of research, being able to run like a really specific, meaningful, powerful piece of research, that's been really exciting for brands.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys both. This was a really interesting conversation. I'm excited to see, how this evolves over time. It's already in a really short amount of time become, really game changing in the industry. And so, there's always questions about how generative AI is impacting our industry and our businesses. And there's some really exciting opportunities here. So, yeah, thanks for having this conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Jen.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Jen.
Thanks everyone for joining in. Bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
guys.